The weight of inheritance. A wooden box with brass corners. A photograph with half a face torn away. A voice on a phone saying, "He's my brother Anna. I told him where you'd go." And somewhere in a locked vault, the air running thin. That was the end. But it began in the attic, where dust hung like suspended time. The circular window above the attic floorboards cast a pale, geometric light across the boards. Anna crawled forward on her knees, the rough oak splintering against her skin, leaving tiny trails of blood she wouldn't notice until later. Her right hand was already gray with soot. She'd been searching through boxes for hours, through the debris of her grandmother's life, through old photographs and stacked letters tied with brittle ribbon. The loose plank was almost invisible. She found it by accident, her palms sliding across the boards, feeling the subtle ridge where wood didn't quite meet wood. She pressed down. It moved, just barely, just enough to make her breath catch. She ran downstairs and grabbed the flathead screwdriver from her car, returned breathless, and positioned it beneath the plank. The muscles in her forearm tensed as she pressed down. The wood groaned, a long, reluctant sound that seemed to come from deep in the house itself. And then it snapped with a dry crack that echoed through the attic. Beneath the board was a cavity, fiberglass insulation, gray and compressed. And something else. Something heavy. The box was tarnished, the brass corners darkened with age. But the nameplate was unmistakable. She wiped the grime away with her thumb, leaving a clean streak across the metal. The engraved letters were elegant, precise. Estate of Eliza Vance, 1984. Her grandmother, dead for 40 years. The lid resisted at first. The latch had rusted shut, and she had to work the screwdriver around the edges, prying gently, then harder, then with desperation. When it finally gave way, the sound was sharp, a violent snap of metal, loud enough to make her flinch. Inside, a stack of parchment bound with a black ribbon, legal documents, and tucked into the corner, a Polaroid. She picked up the parchment first. The paper was thick, expensive, the kind used for wills and testaments. She found the relevant passage quickly. It was bolded, the letters pressed deep into the page. "I hereby bequeath all land holdings and the Vance family trust to my son, Silas Vance." Her hand squeezed the document. The edge crumpled beneath her fingers. Silas, her uncle, the man she'd barely seen since childhood, a shadow in family photographs, someone her mother never spoke about. It didn't make sense. Her mother had always said the estate went to other relatives. She'd never mentioned Silas inheriting anything. And if her grandmother had left him the family trust, why was Anna's mother still living in the cottage on the property? Why was she still working as a conservator, careful with every penny? Anna set the will aside and picked up the photograph. Her hands were shaking now. The image was old, the colors faded to the particular palette of 1980s Polaroids. Two people stood before the same wooden box. This box, the one that now sat open before her. On the left was a woman Anna recognized instantly. Younger, her hair in that style from the decade, but unmistakably her mother. Helena. She was smiling, but the expression was strange. Lips curved upward, but her eyes were flat and cold, like light reflecting off frozen water. The man beside her was handing the box to Helena. Or perhaps she was handing it to him. The angle made it ambiguous. But his face was the problem. Half of it was torn away, jagged and deliberate. Someone had taken scissors or a blade and removed him from the image, leaving only one eye, part of a nose, a strip of jaw. The mutilation seemed intentional, angry. Anna flipped the photograph over. The handwriting was her mother's. She'd know it anywhere. She'd seen it on grocery lists, on birthday cards, on the backs of so many family snapshots. But the message was strange. For Silas, keep it hidden. She never has to know. Below that, in the same hand, someone had written recently. She could tell because the ink was darker, fresher. A single line. The lawyers have the copy. Anna's breath was coming faster. She pressed her thumb against the ink. It smudged slightly. Recently written. Within the last week, maybe. She locked herself in her car and sat with the photograph in her lap, watching the rain begin to fall on the windshield. The world outside was dissolving behind the water. She turned the photograph over and over, studying her mother's face. That cold smile, that unreadable expression. What had Helena been protecting? What was so terrible that her grandmother had hidden it? That her mother had hidden it? That someone had needed to write a warning less than a week ago? She should have called someone. The police, maybe. Her mother. But instead, she put the photograph and the documents back into the box and started the car. She drove toward the city, toward her mother's house, toward answers. Behind her, the old cottage disappeared into the rain. She didn't notice the black SUV following her until the headlights filled her rearview mirror. The first impact came without warning. Metal struck metal, a sound so loud it seemed to come from inside her own skull. Her neck snapped forward, then back against the headrest with enough force to make her vision white out for a second. She was on a rural road, rain hammering the windshield so hard the wipers couldn't keep pace. In her rearview mirror, the massive grille of an SUV filled the entire frame. It was black, expensive, the kind of vehicle built for intimidation. Another impact. This time, she felt the tires slip. The car skidded slightly before she corrected, her hands cramping on the wheel. The driver behind her wasn't ramming her randomly. This was controlled, deliberate. A third strike, harder than the others, sent her car spinning. The world became a blur of dark sky and rain-slicked asphalt. She gripped the wheel and fought the slide, her body braced against the seat. The car went sideways, then finished its rotation with a sickening crunch as the right side of the vehicle hit the guardrail. Metal groaned. Glass shattered. No, not the guardrail. A ditch. The car slid off the road and came to a stop nose down in mud, the engine still running, rain cascading across the cracked windshield. Anna kicked the door open. The box was still on the passenger seat. She grabbed it and stumbled out into the rain, her shoes immediately sinking into mud that was deeper than she expected. Behind her, the SUV had pulled onto the shoulder of the road. Its door opened. A figure in a dark raincoat emerged, moving with the unhurried confidence of someone who knew they had all the time in the world. In their right hand was a tire iron. Anna didn't run. Instead, she backed away, clutching the box, watching. The figure approached. Rain streamed down a face she couldn't quite see in the darkness. But the tire iron was visible, a length of black metal, worn smooth from use. "Hand it over," the figure said. A man's voice, gravelly and low, Anna's back pressed against the rear fender of her damaged car. "Who are you? What do you want?" "The box." He raised the tire iron. "Now." He swung. Anna ducked, and the iron whistled past her head, close enough that she felt the displacement of air. It connected with the car's rear window instead, and the glass exploded into 1,000 fragments. She lunged forward, driving the top of her head directly into his stomach. The air went out of him in a rush. She grabbed a handful of mud from the ground and flung it into his face. He staggered back, cursing, his hands coming up to wipe his eyes. Anna kicked, not at his body, but at his knee. Her boot heel connected with the joint, and she felt something give. A pop. He screamed and collapsed into the muck. Anna didn't wait. She scrambled back into her car, slammed it into reverse, and floored the accelerator. The wheels spun, found purchase, and the vehicle lurched backward onto the road. The damaged bumper dragged on the asphalt, and sparks, bright yellow against the darkness, scattered across the pavement behind her like malicious fireflies. She didn't slow down until she was 5 miles away, her hands shaking so badly she could barely hold the wheel. The rain had stopped by the time she reached her mother's house. Anna pulled into the driveway covered in mud and blood, some of it the attacker's, most of it her own. Her hair was matted, her jacket was torn at the shoulder. She didn't bother looking in the mirror. She walked to the front door and let herself in with her key. The house smelled like it always did. Lavender from the sachets her mother placed in every room. And underneath that, something else. Fear, maybe. The peculiar scent of a place where terrible secrets had been kept for decades. The dining room was lit by candles. Her mother, Helena, was sitting at the head of the table in a silk blouse the color of old money. Her hair had been done that day. She could tell by the arrangement of the waves. Across from her, Uncle Silas sat perfectly still, his fork positioned just so on his plate. He was studying the salad as if it contained profound truths. Both of them looked up as Anna appeared in the doorway. Anna walked to the table without speaking. She raised the box, and for a moment, just a moment, she held it as if it were an offering. Then she brought it down hard on the table surface. The impact was tremendous. Wine spilled across the white tablecloth in a widening bloom of crimson. Glasses rattled. A plate crashed to the floor. She stared at Silas, then at her mother. Her clothes dripped mud onto the white rug. Her breath came in harsh pants. "What is this?" her mother whispered. Anna pulled the torn photograph from the box and slid it across the table. It settled in front of Helena, and as her mother looked at it, all the color drained from her face. "You gave it to him," Anna said. Her voice was low and steady. "You gave it to him, and you helped him steal my life." Helena's hands came up to cover her face. The silk of her blouse crumpled. Her shoulders began to shake. When she spoke, her voice was fractured, broken into pieces by sobs. "He had the gambling debts, Anna," she cried. "They were going to kill him. I had to protect my brother." Silas stood slowly. He pushed his chair back with a deliberate motion, and without looking at either of them, he reached into his jacket. He withdrew a folded legal document and placed it on the table, directly on top of the spilled wine. "It doesn't matter what she says," he said. His voice was smooth, almost amused. "I've already sold the estate. The developers move in tomorrow. You're too late." He left the room. They heard his footsteps on the hardwood floor, then the sound of the front door closing with a soft, final click. Anna looked at her mother, at the tears streaming down her face, at the red wine staining the white tablecloth. She wanted to feel something. Rage, betrayal, grief. Instead, she felt only the cold, clear calculus of survival. She had one night. The law office was closed, the building dark except for the security lights in the lobby. Anna used a glass cutter on the window on the 3rd floor. The one facing the fire escape, the one she'd researched for the past 3 hours in a motel room with a flickering television. The vacuum seal popped softly as she removed the circular piece of glass. She set it carefully on the ground, climbed through, and waited. No alarms, no flashing lights, just the hum of the building's HVAC system and the distant sound of traffic on the street below. She used a pen light to navigate the hallway. Box 402. That was the number Helena had mentioned when she finally stopped crying. When Anna had pressed the phone recording, the message her mother had left when she tipped off Silas into her hands. Her mother had whispered the box number like a deathbed confession. The vault room was locked, but the lock was electronic, and electronic locks could be defeated if you had the right equipment. Anna had spent 15 years in the military before she left. She'd learned many useful things. She used a handheld borescope, a device with a tiny camera no thicker than a ballpoint pen, to peer inside the lock mechanism. On the small digital screen, she could see the tumblers. They were old, outdated, likely not changed in decades. She could bypass them using a tension wrench and a pick. It took her 4 minutes. The vault room was small, and one wall was entirely devoted to safe deposit boxes. Box 402 was near the floor. She opened it using the same method. Inside, wrapped in a plastic envelope, was a will. Not a photocopy. The original. Signed by her grandmother's hand, witnessed by the family's longtime lawyer, a man named Kirkwood, who was no longer alive to be called as a character witness. Behind that document was another. A letter addressed to Anna in the same careful handwriting. She didn't have time to read it. She was photographing the documents when she heard it, the soft hiss of gas. The vault door was closing behind her. She spun around, but the gap was already too narrow. She lunged for it anyway, her fingers reaching for the frame, but something from the outside, an iron bar, she realized, was being slid through the handles. The door sealed shut with a deafening clang. White gas poured from the vents in the ceiling. The glass poured in the door darkened as a face appeared on the other side. Silas. He was holding something that looked like a television remote. "I didn't think you'd be this predictable, Anna," his voice said, muffled by the steel between them. "Goodbye." Anna wrapped her jacket around her face and looked for an exit. There wasn't one. This was a vault. It was designed to be impenetrable. The gas was rising, a white fog that obscured the floor. She was thinking of her mother's voice on the recording. "He's my brother, Anna. I told him where you'd go. You should have just let it be." She found the emergency phone on the wall. It was an old rotary model, probably installed decades ago in case someone got accidentally locked inside. She frantically dialed her mother's number. The gas was at her waist now. She wrapped her jacket tighter around her face. The line picked up on the third ring. "Helena," Anna gasped. "Call someone. I'm locked in the vault. They're pumping gas. You have to." "I know." Her mother's voice was flat, emotionless, completely unlike the sobbing woman from the dinner table. "He's my brother, Anna. I told him where you'd go. You should have just let it be." The line went dead. Anna held the phone for a second, then slowly replaced it on the wall. It dangled there by its cord, swinging slightly like a pendulum. The dial tone continued its endless, mechanical beeping. She sank to the floor as the gas rose around her. She was going to die in a locked box in a law office basement because her mother had decided that her brother's gambling debts were more important than her daughter's life. It was almost absurd. But as she sat there in the encroaching white, her hand touched something solid, the fire extinguisher. Of course, fire extinguishers were required equipment in all commercial buildings, even in vaults. Required by law. She didn't spray it. Instead, she hefted the heavy metal cylinder and smashed it against the brass pressure valve on the structural pipe that ran along the baseboard. Once. Twice. On the third strike, it gave way. Compressed air roared out with a sound like a hurricane. The white gas was torn apart, scattered into wisps. A clear circle opened around her. Anna grabbed the borescope from the floor and yanked the high-voltage wire from its circuit board. She jammed the wire into the electronic control panel of the vault door, then grabbed the fire extinguisher again and sprayed its chemical retardant directly onto the exposed circuit board. The effect was immediate. Sparks flew. The electrical system overloaded, shorted out. The magnetic lock released with a bang that reverberated through the vault. Anna kicked the door. Both feet, all her weight. The iron bar on the outside went flying, and the door swung open with a force that sent it crashing against the opposite wall. She didn't wait to see if it fell. She was already sprinting into the hallway, gasping for air that didn't taste like chemicals, her eyes streaming tears. The sun was rising pink and gold over the countryside when Anna pulled into the driveway of her grandmother's estate. The mist was still settling on the grass, and the air was cold in a way that felt clean, virginal, untouched by the events of the night. Silas was sitting at a garden table near the edge of the property. A man in an expensive suit, probably a developer, probably wealthy, sat across from him. The transfer documents were spread across the table. Silas had a gold pen in his hand, and he was just leaning forward, about to sign. Anna walked directly to the table. She didn't run. She didn't shout. She simply appeared, covered in soot and chemical residue, and placed a recording device onto the white linen tablecloth. She pressed play. Her mother's voice filled the morning air. "He's my brother, Anna. I told him where you'd go. You should have just let it be." Silas froze with his pen in midair. The developer pulled his hand back from the contract. The recording continued, the words echoing across the misty garden like an accusation from the grave. When it finished, Anna pulled out the real will. The original. Signed by Eliza Vance in 1974, witnessed by Kirkwood, witnessed again by an old family friend whose name was still legible on the notary line. "The property was never yours to sell, Silas," Anna said. He stared at the document, and for a moment, just a moment, she saw something cross his face. Not fear exactly. Calculation. The rapid reassessment of odds. Then a police car appeared on the long driveway. Then another. They pulled up to the house slowly, deliberately. Officers got out. They didn't run. This wasn't violent. This was inevitable. One of the officers approached the table and nodded at Silas. "We need you to come with us, sir." Silas didn't resist. He didn't say anything. He simply stood, and the officer placed handcuffs on his wrists. They led him away to the waiting cruiser. The developer gathered his papers quickly, trying to pretend none of this had happened. Anna's mother was standing on the front porch. Her face was blotchy from crying. Her hands were clasped in front of her body, and she was shaking. "Anna, please," she called out as Anna turned to leave. "Anna, I'm your mother. Please." Anna didn't look at her. Instead, she pulled out a silver lighter, a Zippo, heavy and cold in her palm, and flicked it open. The flame was bright, steady, unafraid. She held the torn photograph to the fire. The edges curled black first, then the image began to char. The box in the photo turned to ash. Her mother's face disappeared. The torn man's remaining eye was the last thing to burn. She let the ashes fall onto the gravel drive. They scattered in the wind like snow, like fragments of a past that no longer had any weight. The car keys were in her pocket. She walked to her vehicle, got in, and looked at her reflection in the mirror. Her hair was a mess. Her eyes were red. But something in her expression had changed. The fixed, defensive posture of someone who had finally stopped waiting for other people to determine her fate. She started the engine. The sound was loud and clean in the morning air. She put the car in drive and moved forward, away from the house, away from her mother still standing on the porch, away from everything that had tried to define her with half-truths and stolen inheritances. The sun was rising higher now. burning off the mist. The road ahead was clear,